This is part 4 of the series Building My Own Micromill. If you haven't watched the previous episodes, I recommend you do that first. In this episode, I finished the major work on the cross table. Here I am drilling the through hole for the Y-axis spindle, 11 mm diameter and 80 mm deep. I hope the drill doesn't drift too much. For the nut of the Y-axis, I need a hole of exactly 15 mm diameter and 20 mm deep. Temporarily, I mount this nut with a light press fit. Later in the video, I make an adjustable nut for minimal backlash. Lacking a 15 mm reamer, I have to use my boring head. I've gotten a lot of use out of this cheap ER40 collet chuck that I modified for use in my lathe. Check out that video if you haven't already. The flange needs to be removed from the nut. I am using one of the purchased 10 mm lead screws as a mandrel and one of the nuts as a stop block. In the collet, this should turn nicely true. The end of the 10 mm lead screw is turned down to 8 mm for the handwheel, and an M6 thread is applied to secure the handwheel later on. The spindle is absolutely not damaged by the collet. From a piece of scrap steel, I file and saw the 3 keys for the 3 mm wide keyways in the lead screws for the X, Y, and Z axes. I already made this bearing block in the previous video. Here I mount the screw spindle, the handwheel, the 2 thrust bearings and the ball bearing. The result is a wonderfully smooth turning handwheel without any play that could add to the backlash later on. The nut is secured by screwing in an M6 set screw on the other side. I drill 5 3.2mm holes and tap M4 threads for the 4 jib screws and a blocking screw in the center. The set screws used here are temporary. The correct ones are used later in the video. In the jib, I make 3mm recesses with a flat bottom at a 30-degree angle for the set screws. That runs very smoothly, happy with it. Time to start milling the dovetail for the x-axis. The effort I put into getting both dovetails as square to each other as possible is not shown in this video. At the bottom of the saddle, the smoothly finished reference surfaces that I used for accurate alignment are visible. This dovetail also runs nicely. I temporarily fix the jib to mark the exact location for the flat surfaces in the jib with 4-point screws. The four M4 screw holes for the X-axis bearing block are tapped here. Again, great effort is made to clamp the saddle as true as possible. With a set of drills ground as accurately as possible to prevent wandering, the 11mm hole for the X-axis lead screw is drilled. Well, if you don't have an adequate drill size, nor a 15mm reamer, then you'll have to use this annoyingly slender boring head again. I'm the Major of Chattertown. It seemed to me like 500,000 passes of 1/100th of a micron or so, but in the end, the squeaking and creaking did lead to a clean hole of 15mm diameter. A 10mm deep M16 thread with a pitch of 1mm was tapped in it for the second nut, with which any backlash can be eliminated. Here I finished the bearing block for the X-axis. Later, just like with the Y-axis bearing block, bevels will be added off camera. Later in the video, the nut is threaded on the outside with a 1mm pitch, while the pitch on the inside is 2mm. The nut flange is here provided with a hexagon so that the backlash can be easily removed later by turning the nut a little. An M4 bolt and a piece of palm clamped against the thread prevent this nut from rotating unintentionally later. The spindle for the X-axis is also provided with an 8mm diameter end, an M6 thread and a 3mm wide keyway. All the important parts for the cross table are finished. I still have to make the way wipers, the seal for the Y-axis lead screw, and also the second nut for the Y-axis. But the functionality of the cross table is now complete. So now it is time for a test assembly, and then the most exciting part, measuring the rigidity and accuracy of this cross table. Here I measure, with the help of my precision square, whether my attempts to mill the dovetails as perpendicular as possible to each other have succeeded, and to my great satisfaction, that appears to be the case. Apart from a few minor points that are easy to fix, the table runs very smoothly and accurately. And 12 microns backlash is nothing to be ashamed of, I think. But much more importantly, any backlash in the future can be easily eliminated, even during use. I'm just a robot, so expressing emotions is definitely not my strongest point. So you'll have to imagine the sound of a very loud hooray. And, yes, yourself.